Theorizing that one could discuss philosophy using pop culture, Dr. Ben McLean stepped into the Trekosophy accelerator and vanished. He awoke to find himself in a strange podcast, having a conversation with a guy in a red shirt, talking about opinions that were not his own. Now he finds himself wandering from episode to episode. His only companions on this journey are the computer guru known as Chris Ziggy McGee, and Ash Hume, who appears as only a hologram that only he can see. And now he finds himself leaping from episode to episode of Star Trek, discussing all the philosophical implications, hoping each time that the next leap will be the leap to move along home. We will petition the UN to build a bridge connecting Japan to New Zealand, and we will embezzle all the money they give us to build this bridge.
Oh, yes. Very, very, very clever plan.
We'll just make it out of inflatable rafts and get the money that would have supported concrete and steel.
Definitely.
As long as there's a bouncy castle in the middle. Huh?
Yes, bouncy castle at every rest stop.
Oh, boy. On Trekosophy today, the episode from the original series, The City on the Edge of Forever, which is commonly cited as one of the greatest Star Trek episodes of all time. And who's got Memory Alpha open?
Oh, shame on you. The question should have been, who doesn't have Memory Alpha open?
Well, I don't right now. Somebody read it?
Oh, you want that crappy intro that they always have?
Maybe we should find
not intro, but synopsis. After taking an accidental overdose of cordrazine, Dr. Leonard McCoy goes back in time and changes history.
Oh. Yeah,
exactly.
That's a...
Seriously, Memory Alpha, get your crap together. If anyone on Memory Alpha listens to this show, you should know that we're taking a stand. That really sucks. You need to totally fix it.
Yes, let's insult the largest Star Trek database in the world. That'll go over well.
Well, they're pretty good at collecting obscure trivia, but as far as basic competent writing on areas like that, it really sucks. I mean, it does. Maybe we should find another resource for summarizing episodes for us in future. I don't know. Anyways, what would you say are the philosophical issues raised by this episode?
Wait, we're going to dive right into the moral lesson?
Well, I mean, just general. I mean, we got time travel. That always has a bunch of metaphysics going on. Whenever there's time travel, there's metaphysics. And then there's the ethical question raised about what is it acceptable to do or not do to change history or I mean, to fix a changed history.
I think it might even touch on what Spock said in Wrath of Khan, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one.
Good old utilitarianism. Here we go.
Yeah.
Yay!
This episode does seem to rely pretty heavily on the utilitarian assumption of the greatest good for the greatest number trumping absolutely everything else.
I think, though, there is a little bit of an extra element to it. It's like it's about not making too many emotional attachments. I mean, it's all well and good to say needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, unless the few are people you care about. Then it's a lot harder to just say, well, yeah, because it's bad. I mean, Kirk was going to look for a way to save her and preserve history, and Spock was like, nope. Can't do it.
Old enough to be a great grandmother.
I'd love to hear a system of ethics that actually disputes Kirk's choice in this.
Well, we have to identify what the choice was, first of all.
To let Edith Keeler die.
That's right. He holds McCoy back rather than letting McCoy save what's-her-face from the oncoming car.
Which, by the way, a quick aside here, every time Spock says this twice in the episode, by the way, Edith Keeler must die. Every time he says that, I think of that game that's on Steam, Orcs Must Die, but with Edith Keeler in it. Don't know why.
I half expect his next line to be, "The plot demands it." We must appease the TV tropes gods. They demand a sacrifice.
Technically, I don't know if this counts as a TV trope because I think this is pretty much like predating it. Star Trek invented the tropes, you know. Now it's a trope. Back then it was original. It's like, did you notice that Shakespeare's writing is just nothing but cliches?
Yeah, he invented
because they weren't cliches when he wrote them.
But this idea that a major character must die to save other people, that's certainly not new. Anyway, but back on more seriousness, well, you remember from our Ethics of Time Travel episode that we analyzed 4 different ethical systems. They were, if I remember correctly, we had normal utilitarianism, rule-based utilitarianism, social contract theory, and deontology. Not that these are the only options, but these are modern ethical systems. And also from our Ethics of Time Travel episode, I don't see how we could very easily apply social contract theory to a time travel situation, because the question arises, who is the community? And in this case, it's not clear. So there's no laws of time travel that we know of as far as, that you could violate. So, I mean, not in the time police sense. I mean, there are series that have time police, but there aren't any time police in the Star Trek universe, at least not at this point.
Not to avoid
Kirk did commit 17 separate time violations, but
but the time police never told him that, so he couldn't be in a social contract. So that one's out. So we have to look at the other 3. And in their case, what were they? Regular utilitarianism. Yeah, regular utilitarianism totally approves of this, I think.
Yes.
And Immanuel Kant's deontology basically says, is it okay for anyone to do this anytime? And I'm pretty sure Kant would say probably not. And the reason is because one of the formulations well, maybe I should review what deontology is.
Yeah, do that real quickly, and then I'll have something to say there.
Okay, well, deontology is Immanuel Kant's system, and Kant is very much against the end justifies the means. He's even against the idea that the end result is what makes an action moral or immoral. And part of that's because he thinks you can't really know the end result ahead of time for sure. So the only thing that matters for Kant is the motive or intention behind the action, which might involve a little bit, what you're trying to do rather than what actually would result. And so that makes it complicated, but basically Kant's ethics boil down to 3 maxims. They all are supposed to refer to the same categorical imperative, and that means it's an ethical maxim or principle that if your action complies with it, then your action is good, and if your action fails to comply with it, then your action is bad. And this would be the basis of all moral obligation according to Kant. And Kant's categorical imperative has his 3 maxims, and they're basically the first one would be universality. That is, would you be able to consistently will that everyone would do the same kind of thing you're doing all the time? That's the first one. You have to have your maxim must have universality. You must be able to consistently will that it be made a universal law. The second formulation of the categorical imperative is the idea that all other people should always and only be regarded as ends rather than as means to an end. So you can't ever manipulate people or lie to people for any reason, because you have to regard them as being just as much of an end in themselves as you are. So you can't make, and so a lot of what the categorical imperative is saying is that you can't make any special exceptions for yourself or for some particular goal that you happen to have. All right.
All right.
And then the third one is a bit more complicated to explain. Let me actually look it up real quick. Yeah. The third one's basically every rational being must so act as if he were, through his maxim, always a legislating member in the universal kingdom of ends. And basically you have to consider yourself both as a means and an end. And the trouble is, how this is different from the second formulation is difficult to describe. But you sort of get the gist, though.
Yeah, so to get the gist, maybe everybody is the main character in their own story, and they can't really
you
treat other people as if they are not.
Yeah,
sort of as important.
Kind of like that. Yeah, and this is a very tough-minded system. I mean, it.
Right.
It's absolute. There's no loopholes in Kantianism. It's you absolutely cannot lie to anybody ever for any reason. Now, so in regard to the city on the edge of forever, Kant would say that to allow, what's her name again?
Edith Keeler?
Edith Keeler. To allow Edith Keeler to die would be using Edith Keeler as a means to your end of restoring history, rather than regarding her as an end in herself. Kant would look at this and he would say, Edith Keeler is her own rational and moral agent, and you have no moral authority to kill her in order to save history. That would be consequentialism. So really, it's only utilitarianism.
Well,
that once again that approves of what they're trying to do in mucking about in time. Now, what you're going to say, Chris?
I think actually deontology might contradict itself here.
First
of all, you stated that in general, Kantian ethics are in place because we generally don't know the future. Well, in this particular instance, we actually do know what the future will be. That aside, however...
Well, actually, that would not be given by Kant as a reason for his system, but it is given by Kant as a criticism of other systems.
Oh, okay. Well,
I mean, Kant's reasoning for his system is supposed to be completely a priori. He would say that his system is correct pretty much by definition. It's
okay. Well,
it's kind of arrogant.
Regardless,
just cause
deontology basically said your argument is that because you would be using Edith Keeler as a means toward an end and not as an end in herself, that would be wrong. Thus, deontology would say it would be wrong to let her die. However, isn't it also part of deontology that states you cannot allow? You mentioned this, and I can't remember exactly how you worded it, but you said something along the lines of you can't allow like your personal feelings or something to come into play there. I can't remember exactly how you had stated that.
You can't make any special exception.
That's what it was. Can't make any special exception. It has to be universal.
Yeah. And the rules, you have to treat anything that you want to do. You have to ask the question, would I be able to rationally will that any person, anywhere, anytime, or well, yeah, if faced with the same kind of action would I be able to will that anyone in this, anyone faced with this kind of action would take the same action? And
Okay, never mind then.
it isn't do I feel like that would be okay. It's more like, can I be rationally consistent in willing it, is what Kant is after. Now, I'm not a Kantian. I'm just presenting the idea like you would hear it in an ethics course if you signed up for one in college. This is pretty much what they'd tell you. Now, here's the thing. There's a lot of situations where Kantian ethics do give rise to this situation where you can't let your personal feelings dictate your actions, but that's true for a lot of systems, not just Kant. Now, here's the tricky one, and that is the last system we haven't talked about yet, and that is rule-based utilitarianism, which tries to sort of borrow from the other ones. It says you want to do that which produces the greatest good for the greatest number, but you need to, instead of by yourself making that determination, you need instead to make rules with the goal of producing the greatest good for the greatest number if everyone was to follow them. So it's still consequentialist, but it does, it's consequentialism plus universality. That's rule-based utilitarianism. It says make rules that you think would, if everyone followed them, produce the greatest good for the greatest number. Now, how would rule-based utilitarianism look at what Spock and Kirk and company do in this episode?
I have no clue.
Yeah, that one's tough.
Unless you want to state that the rule... I mean, you just come up with the rules
it might be
based on the situation? Or just they have to be universal rules, or what?
Well, it's sort of difficult in the sense, almost similarly to why the social contract is difficult to apply, in that there aren't any rules that they can fall back on, or at that point.
Well, yeah, the idea though in rule-based utilitarianism is that it is a guide for making rules. So let's imagine we're Starfleet, and we have to draw up rules for what moral rules for what Starfleet officers should do if they're in a time travel situation. All right, that's when rule-based utilitarianism should apply, because it's a guide for making rules. So what rules for time travel situations would produce the greatest good for the greatest number?
Not letting the Nazis win.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty obvious one.
The thing is, we're looking at the problem Kirk had as being whether or not he should have saved Edith Keeler as the big dilemma. But I don't know. When I look at it, I see it as that's not the dilemma. That's sort of the inevitable outcome. Because I mean, you're not going to let the Nazis win. So she, like Spock was saying over and over again, she's going to die. And even if you were to tell her flat out what you were doing, Edith Keeler probably would have killed herself in order to preserve time. If the choice was up to her, knowing what was coming, she would have died. She would have wanted to die. That's the kind of person she was. The real ethical dilemma that's a little bit trickier and a little bit harder to pin down is getting emotionally attached. I mean, if you don't care about people, and you don't care whether the Nazis won or not, but if you do care about people, then you're going to have a hard time making choices like Kirk had to make because you get attached to them. So I think that would be a more interesting aspect to maybe look at and see what you guys think, is Kirk was screwing up by making an emotional attachment, not by trying to decide whether or not she should be saved. Because he's an outsider, he's a stranger, he's not going to stick around, and making that emotional attachment is not a good thing. But if you don't make any emotional attachments, you end up being a monster.
Is Spock a monster?
Spock tries to be a monster, but his human side wins out.
Okay.
Spock has his emotional attachments. He just does very well at covering them up. We've seen bits and pieces of Spock's emotional attachments rearing their heads. Him and Nurse Chapel, him and Uhura, him and Kirk, him and McCoy even. Spock has emotional attachments. He just hides them. So you still need to make them. Even Spock would say, you got to make those attachments. Well, he wouldn't say that, but he would be wrong because he tries not to. He tries to stay detached, but you can't stay detached. You can just pretend you are detached and not let it bother you, I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it sounds like you're kind of saying that this episode kind of isn't just utilitarianism, it's also Buddhism.
A little bit. I mean, honestly, as far as the do you let Edith Keeler die thing, yes, utilitarianism is the best ism, and it says stop the Nazis. And the other systems, may drag their feet, but they'll also eventually come around to saying, stop the Nazis. Genocide, mass murder, horror, and terrible suffering is always a really, really, really bad thing. Letting one person get hit by a car doesn't really stack up under any... I mean, I don't know what sort of values they place on different levels of bad in other systems, but I think stopping the Nazis kind of throws things for a loop as far as who would or would not approve of taking certain courses of action. So it really...
I don't. I think the different systems really are different and would have to stick to their guns, no matter what. I mean, there's no way that Immanuel Kant would approve of Kirk's decision in this episode. There's no way. I mean, there's one thing we can be pretty sure about it. There's no way on that.
Then Kant is wrong. His system is fundamentally flawed somehow.
Yeah, that's what. That's what you think because you're a utilitarian. Myself, I think Spock is being awfully dogmatic about how much he really knows about the situation.
Spock always seems to be promoting utilitarianism.
And he always seems really dogmatic. I mean, he seems to have this absolute certainty that unless Edith Keeler. Edith Keeler.
Write it down.
Keeler. Unless Edith Keeler dies, then the Nazis win, and he's just absolutely sure about that. And there's no reason we'd be stuck with interpreting what we knew that way. I mean, it's in the Christmas Carol, Scrooge asks, "Are these the shadows of things that will be, or are they the shadows of things that may be only?" Spock doesn't even ask that question. He assumes he already knows what the things he sees in his tricorder are.
Well, that's the thing about time travel in general and why it tends to throw these things for a loop, because there already is when you switch perspectives to a different time, then you're looking forward at the future, and the future is always about what may be, not what is. But when you're from the future and you go to the past, there what may be is yours already was. It was that way. And when you start and that's what kind of makes it a little bit screwy. You can't this whole be guided by your morals and not by the outcome kind of thing is less applicable in time travel because you know the outcome in advance. At
least the way the story presents time travel, we are led to believe or assume we know what happens. Whether we actually could is certainly worth asking, though. But let's assume we could, because it makes for interesting discussion. Let's assume we could know for sure what Spock knew. Let's assume that the Guardian of Forever, who we can assume is omniscient, told Spock that if Edith Keeler doesn't die, then the Nazis will win. All right. I still think this episode, like a lot of time travel stories, shows utilitarianism kind of goes out of control. If we can kill an innocent person in order to stop Hitler, then is it just Hitler, or does this apply more generally?
Well, no, I think there's your problem.
If it applies more generally, then where does it stop? How bad does the person have to be that we're trying to stop in order to justify killing an innocent person to stop them?
See, but there's where you're getting hung up on, is you're saying it's about killing somebody. They didn't kill her. They just didn't save her. It's about choosing to not take action. And if you don't take action...
Okay. Now, why does that distinction matter? And I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I'm asking you why that distinction matters.
Well, in this
case... The question is not a statement, all right? Just so don't interpret my thing as a statement.
No.
Asking a question.
I get it. In this case, if I'm following you correctly, and I might not be because it's been that kind of a week, it seems like you're saying that under most moral situation, under most of these ethical systems we discuss, murder is wrong, so what they did to Edith Keeler was wrong. But what they did to Edith Keeler was not murder. It was just not taking an action to save her life. She was going to...
It was inaction rather than action.
Right. And does inaction qualify as... I mean, it is a choice, but does it carry the same ethical implication? If they weren't there, if they weren't involved in it at all, if they take themselves completely out of the equation, she dies. They stand there and they do nothing, she dies. So they don't change anything with their presence there. Had they changed something with their presence there, then there'd be moral questions, and we'd probably all hate them for letting the Nazis win and causing the death of millions in a war that stretched out and ended with the nuclear devastation of America in the 50s, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, if your morality says murder is wrong, that's fine. But then you have, I mean, you're saying utilitarianism runs wild in this episode and gets out of control because where do you draw the line? The same thing applies to just describing this as murder. If this is considered murder, then where do you draw the line to the point where, I mean, everybody on this planet will inevitably die. So you're going to have a baby. That baby is going to die because you chose to have it. So every parent is guilty of murder.
Yeah. Well, I think I get what you're saying. You've really said that it ought to make a difference. You're basically saying that if we don't think that active decisions and decisions for inaction are different and merit different value judgments or different standards for value judgment or whatnot, if we don't recognize the difference between an action and a decision to remain inactive, then we're messed up. We're leaving out something important, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
But you haven't exactly answered the question, why is the difference important? You've said that it's important, but you haven't explained why it's important. Like, for instance, wait. Yes, you have. Let me correct myself. You're saying that if we don't regard action and inaction as different, then we produce an absurdity,
yes,
which is the absurdity of... So what you're making is basically a reductio ad absurdum. You know that term?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I deserve a medal for all the millions of lives I've saved because I've chosen not to go out kill people.
Yeah. So you're saying that disregarding the difference between actions and inactions produces a reductio ad absurdum. All right. So the reason we should regard action as different from inaction in a moral sense is because doing anything else would be absurd. Okay. So, isn't there such a thing as a sin of omission, at least somewhere, though?
Yeah, sure. And I'm not saying we don't pass any type of moral judgment at all on this situation, but what I'm saying is you can't consider it to be murder. I mean, you
Okay.
can judge the actions
Yeah.
of non-interference as to whether or not that's right, but that's not the same as murder because murder is the taking of a
Yeah.
life.
You're right. It wouldn't stand up as murder in a court, that's for sure. But it's something. We've got to give it some kind of identifier just so we can talk about it. I mean, what is it exactly? That's what we need. We need to figure that out, you know?
I think it comes down to now, me personally, I've never been a fan of the Prime Directive. I think it's a bad idea. And I think in a lot of ways, this issue sort of speaks to that because in the eyes of the Federation, non-interference is a good thing because you don't want to screw things up and make them bad. And we see that as the morally right choice. But if you can get involved and make things better, shouldn't you? And that's what this question comes down to. When it comes to interfering with primitive cultures, generally people will support the Prime Directive, but you seem to be saying that in this case, it is a bad idea and should be ignored.
Me?
Yeah.
I'm saying that?
Well, based on the various moral and ethical systems, most of them would find the Prime Directive to be unethical or immoral.
Oh, okay. Why is that? Could you look at each one and say
Well,
why?
you already did.
I didn't do the Prime Directive in them, did I?
Like I say, you did Edith Keeler. Letting Edith
Yeah.
Keeler die, non-interference in this case has been judged, and according to how you judged it using the various ethical systems, you found that most of them found that non-interference was morally wrong.
Yeah, but you seem to be saying that they'd find non-interference morally wrong in most or all first contact situations, and that's definitely not the case for all these different systems.
And
they would not always come down against interference.
And that's why I'm asking why. I mean, that's why I'm saying there's something odd and inconsistent in how we look at this case. I don't know if it's because of the time travel angle or if it's whatever, but I mean, doesn't it boil down to the same thing? Why is it that these moral and ethical codes will support the Prime Directive but judge harshly Kirk and Spock allowing Edith Keeler to die?
Well, I don't know that they would. None of them support the Prime Directive all the time, and none of them are against the Prime Directive all the time. As far as I know, social contract theory might be for the Prime Directive all the time.
Yeah.
That's part of the social contract in Starfleet. But the other ones wouldn't be for the Prime Directive all the time. But only some of the time.
I think in the case of, for example, that can't remember their names, but that civilization where Worf's brother tried to save that small, I guess, clan of people, and Picard and the crew of the Enterprise were willing to stand by and not save their planet. At that point, maybe the utilitarian system would not support the Prime Directive because it's swaying the good of those people against the good of the Prime Directive.
Yeah.
But that's also a bit of a tricky one because they probably wouldn't have supported Worf's brother just saving that one little clan either. But that's one example where they might not have supported it.
Absolutely.
I think they'd look at it maybe on a case-by-case basis, which is probably the best way to look at the Prime Directive from a practical sense anyway, maybe.
And that works for me. I mean, that makes sense. And it goes to what Ben was saying about it. Sometimes it'll apply, sometimes it won't. Which is why I was questioning why we should consider Edith Keeler's death a murder.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but my question was, if it's not a murder, what do we call it? And, what I mean is, not the motivation Kirk had, but what do we call the decision to not save someone when you could save them?
Well, if it is
being
an evil,
complicit.
yeah, complicity, evil by inaction.
Complicity in their death. Complicity in the death of an innocent person. That's what we could charge Kirk with in this case.
Yeah, but it's
not
like, it just still doesn't sit right with me because it has all these strong, like, negative connotations. I mean, is there a more neutral way we can word that? Because, like, a lot of the ways we say it, he sounds guilty before we've even evaluated the case, and that doesn't seem right.
What I'm trying to what I'm trying to state is this is what the charge is, and then we see if we can get him off.
Okay,
that's all I'm saying there.
Yeah, and I'd say we could get him off because it's a spurious claim.
A lot of those wordings were sort of, if we assume he's guilty of something, or if we assume we want to charge him with something, what would we charge him with?
That's the question I'm asking. Very good. That's what I was looking for when I asked him, what do we call it? If we're going to charge him with something, what would we charge him with?
Well, if you want to do it that way, something along the lines of negligence or malfeasance. I mean, he chose to do nothing. Isn't that negligence?
Well, maybe. Manslaughter might be.
Involuntary manslaughter.
Well, it was kind of voluntary. That's the thing.
Well, it was non-interference.
Manslaughter is more you do something and someone dies. It's not so much. That's not so much you don't do something and someone dies.
Well, he did do something. He held McCoy back.
Okay, it's true.
Wow, this is just so tricky.
Yeah, it is. It is. That makes this a good episode for Trekosophy.
Anyway, we can bring it to a satisfactory conclusion soon.
I don't know if we're going to this time. It's difficult. This is
just worked out what the problem is.
This is a difficult case.
It's interesting to note that.
I think something like maybe negligible homicide is possibly close.
None of us is a lawyer. We don't know any of these.
That's what we need. We need to get a lawyer on this show.
Are you kidding me?
Complain at it all the time.
I guess I'd also like to point out that it is interesting that when it comes to Kirk's list of true loves, Edith Keeler gets on there quite often, even though this was about as brief of a non-fling that you could have and have a fling.
The thing is, if you have that long of a list, can any of them really be true?
I agree.
I think in some way, Kirk loved every woman he ever knew. What was that thing that Guinan told Wesley? You'll love a bunch of different times, it'll never be the same each time. But I think there were probably a handful that were extra special. Edith Keeler and Carol Marcus come to mind. I mean, the fact that he stayed in touch with her 20, 30 years later, and they were on friendly enough terms. They were still on first-name bases. And when she gets in trouble, he runs off to save her. These are the people he...
Dang it, Bill. You're contradicting yourself. I was trying to get you to talk about that when you were impersonating Kirk for Halloween in, like, 2012, or was it 2013?
I was drunk at the time. It doesn't count.
Okay. Well, seriously. Then I felt like a total idiot when you didn't want to do that and pretty much said, nope, not really.
I loved them all, but there was... I think I did say back then, though, he loved them all. There wasn't just one. There wasn't one true love, but there were a handful of special loves. The short list.
Yeah, that's what I was as Odo trying to get you to.
The ones he highlights in his little black book.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get you to talk about
a 5-star rating
for Halloween.
I was drunk.
Okay. Well, anyways.
Oh boy. Now, did anyone here wonder if the character only known as the Rodent in this episode, played by John Harmon, if he would have amounted to anything had he not killed himself with McCoy's phaser?
What? Oh, I don't even remember that now. I saw the episode just today, and I don't remember that.
Given his sleazy nature, I have a funny feeling he probably owed money to a loan shark somewhere, and if he hadn't zapped him with McCoy's weapon, he would have wound it up wearing a pair of,
galoshes.
yeah, concrete galoshes.
I just wonder whether or not that might have snowballed into something the way Edith Keeler would have, because she was just a social worker and she met the president and caused all this other upheaval. This guy was
Given
a bum.
how sleazy he was, he probably would have A, ended up going nowhere, or B, ended up becoming a politician.
Okay. So either way, no one of consequence.
Yeah, you know what would be crazy if somebody wrote a time travel story that basically said, when you travel in time, assassinating politicians doesn't change a damn thing. But if you kill one of those freaking butterflies,
Yeah.
then you're screwed.
Then you can prevent tornadoes.
You totally get different weather patterns if you ever step on a butterfly. But if you kill politicians, doesn't matter.
I still need to see that movie.
I should totally make a movie based on that premise. That'd be crazy.
The butterfly assassin.
Well, yeah. Well, it's just, somebody goes back in time and assassinates a president, and it turns out to be JFK. Hits the magic bullet, but nothing really changes in the timeline other than JFK being dead. And then somebody goes back in time trying to stop the guy and steps on a butterfly and causes this huge tsunami that pretty much wipes out Asia. And as a result, the entire political landscape is changed.
Well, bringing it back to our intro, actually, Dr. Sam Beckett leaped into Lee Harvey Oswald once.
Oh wow! I need to watch that sometime.
That was a two-parter, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was one of those I think last season interesting episodes.
Yeah, it was the season opener for the final season, and I think it was either a two-parter or just a 2-hour-long episode. I can't remember which.
And Red Dwarf, JFK killed himself from the grassy knoll.
I remember that. That was well done.
Red Dwarf?
That was a good one.
What?
Yeah.
Is that a Quantum Leap episode, or what is that?
No, Red Dwarf is a British sci-fi show.
Oh.
It's a sci-fi sitcom, kind of.
So JFK assassinates himself using time travel?
Yes.
Yeah, basically. Red Dwarf is weird.
It's an odd show.
That's all you need to know.
That was actually a pretty well done episode. It was one of the ones that creeped me out, though, because there was no laugh track.
Oh.
I can't stand laugh tracks.
I always thought laugh tracks were creepy, so no laugh track sounds like it should be less creepy.
I don't mind a laugh track. I mean, but a show with a laugh track that suddenly takes the laugh track away, or film before a live studio audience, you gotta have that. When that's not there and it's supposed to be.
Oh, I don't like the canned laughter that just sort of stops before it sounds natural to stop.
Yeah,
we need more canned laughter on this show. We really do.
Yeah,
no, we don't.
There's a button on a lot of electronic keyboards have an applause button in their sound effects sound font.
Yeah, they've got it. There's like 3 or 4 buttons for applause, and then a few other buttons. You hit those, and those are the whistles, so you can sit there and have people whistling in the crowd. Yes, I had a little Casio back in the day. And yes,
I mean, we're not even joking. I mean, this is totally the case. I mean,
I've had a few Casios in my time too.
Okay.
Well, shall we bring this one to a close, Mr. Allen?
Sure, why not? Thanks for listening again, folks. I'd like to thank our intrepid staff for all they see and do and hear. Thank you to Chris McGee, Ash Hume, and Ben McLean. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, email us at trekosophy@gmail.com. These episodes are available in the iTunes Store. We are building up a presence on YouTube. And we will see you again. Join us next week as Dr. Ben McLean leaps into a small boy and his family trapped in deep space aboard the spaceship Jupiter 2.
Oh, Billy boy, where the hell are you? Okay, so I guess at least 3 of us have watched the episode recently. Sorry, Bill.
Define recently. I mean, we are talking time travel here.
I watched it next Tuesday.
So how crazy are we talking? I mean, are we Tim Burton crazy, or are we in Stanley Kubrick territory?
And they're missing Disco Inferno from season 2?
Well, I wouldn't say
on.
they're missing it.
I guess we're doing an episode today after all.
We are
Great.
going.
Looks like it.
He sounds so enthusiastic. Looks like it.
And am I the only one? The only thing, I know a lot of people don't like that episode, but I gotta say, the only thing I didn't like about that episode was when the captain sang. Because he's a dude with that deep, bass voice. And then he sings,
it a few
out of the
octaves.
rain,
Out of the rain, can't do fall. Out of the rain, no freak more. Out of the rain, you can see.
that high.
Even Kira's voice was lower than his when she sang it.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's just a comment on Kira or... No, I think it's a comment on Cisco. The dude's voice was way too high. So you guys have had some kind of wacky conversation that's on tape already?
Define tape.
If we have a conversation, then it's wacky.
Neither am I. I'm gonna suck like a Hoover.
If you stole money from Switzerland, could you keep it in a Swiss bank account? And would they well, all of the money is still there, so it doesn't really count as a robbery.
Alright, guys. What's our topic for next week?
Yeah, that's it. We need a topic for
We
next
need to pick
time.
something.
Poker.
A what?
Poker.
Oh,
poker.
Well, we could try
What did
that.
you think I said?
I thought you said hooker.
I don't know what kind of card games you've been playing, Mr. McLean, but this is a family program. I'll be the slow one who doesn't know what's going on. So it's a typical Trekosophy episode.